Deanna Raybourn is back with another in her Veronica Speedwell Victorian mystery series. This time, it's a grave robbery. Stay tuned as we learn more about the latest mystery to be solved by Veronica and her beau, Stoker. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and this is Some Books Considered. And today, I'll talk with Deanna Raybourn about this 9th book in the series. We'll discuss the inspiration for the best-selling series and the challenge of writing novels set in the Victorian era. And if you're not familiar with Deanna Raybourn, she's the New York Times best-selling author of the novel Killers of a Certain Age, as well as several book series, including the Lady Julia Gray mysteries and the Veronica Speedwell mystery series. She joins us to talk about the latest book in the Speedwell series, A Grave Robbery. Deanna, welcome to Some Books Considered.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, before we talk about this latest book in the series, let's talk about the series itself. And for those who may not be familiar with it, tell us about the Veronica Speedwell series and Veronica and Stoker.
Veronica is my little Victorian lepidopterist, which is just a fancy word for a butterfly hunter. She is an amateur sleuth, so she is not detecting in a professional capacity. She just has an unfortunate habit of falling over dead bodies or, encountering jewel thieves or whatever the case happens to be. She's in her mid-20s when the series opens, and like a lot of people in their mid-20s, she probably thinks that she knows a little bit more than she actually does. But she is stout of heart and never turns down an opportunity for adventure. And her sidekick in these adventures is the Honorable Revelstoke Templeton Vane, who goes by Stoker because that's a mouthful. He's also a natural historian, but his focus tends to be in zoological. And he engages in some taxidermy for the purposes of education. He doesn't go out. It used to be the habit in Victorian times where scientists would go out and they would shoot their own specimens and they would stuff them and they would put them in museums. Stoker's purpose and practice is to kind of rehabilitate bad taxidermy. And the result of this is people send me all the time pictures of really tragic taxidermy that they find. And I guess I'm just lucky they haven't sent me actual samples of bad taxidermy. It's just pictures so far, thank God.
So I understand that this character, Veronica, is based on a real woman. Tell us about her.
Veronica was inspired by Margaret Fountain, who was a Victorian lepidopterist. I left college with a history degree, but it was a lot of, studying what white men in Western Europe were doing for 1,000 years. And so I decided kind of on my own to go figure out what women were up to, because the university where I studied didn't have a ton of classes about that at the time, at the time that I graduated, which was a very long time ago now. And so I kind of got smitten with these Victorian female explorers. We have an idea that Victorian women were sitting around in the parlor, serving tea to the vicar, and a lot of them were, certainly. But there were also women who were going out and seeing the world. They were botanists, or they were archaeologists, or they were just world travelers. And in the case of Margaret Fountain, she was a butterfly hunter. And the great thing about Victorians is they leave us this incredible legacy of letters and diaries and all sorts of records of their achievements and their travels and everything they encountered. And Margaret was one of those. She left journals behind, so we can read them and find out exactly what it was like to be a woman in the 1880s, traveling the world and securing these gorgeous butterfly specimens. It was a genteel and prosperous way for a lady to make a living at the time. And in Margaret's journals, you can also find out that life is not always what you think it's going to be for a Victorian woman, because Margaret was having a real lot of sex all around the world. She had relationships outside of marriage. She had interracial relationships. And those just aren't things that we typically think of a Victorian spinster as doing if she's going to be, having this world tour. And, Margaret made the most out of life, and her journals made such fascinating reading that I thought, if I ever have the opportunity to do another Victorian series, because I had already done one, I really wanted the main character to be inspired by her. I wanted to have a lepidopterist, and I wanted to have a lepidopterist who was doing some unexpected things. I wanted her to push the boundaries a little bit. And that's the amazing thing, is the very things that readers think that I'm taking the most license with as a writer are actually rooted in history. And I love that, because history is just this vast and unexpected place if you get just beyond the surface of it.
So Veronica Speedwell is inspired by this woman and has a lot of that same energy and wanting to push the boundaries, it sounds like. So let's talk about this current novel. It's the 9th in the series. So where are you taking readers this time?
This one is set in London. We've book 8 was set in the countryside, so now we're back in London. I do love to give readers a little diversion to different parts of Stoker and Veronica's world, but this time they're back in their home city. They always have, Stoker and Veronica both have a sort of push me pull you relationship with London. They love all of the kind of all of the benefits to living in the city, but they also, because they're both natural historians, because they both love travel and getting to see places they've never seen before, they also kind of hate it. So this is very constricting for them. But so I try to give them experiences in London that are unexpected. And this time they encounter a wax figure that Stoker is supposed to kind of rehabilitate. It's kind of gently related to taxidermy, that he could restore this wax figure, make a few alterations to it. And when he goes to start, he realizes it's not a wax figure. It is a well-preserved corpse. And so Veronica and Stoker have to figure out how this poor young woman came to be in the state she's in.
And I want to ask you about the challenge of writing a series that's set in this time frame. I imagine you have to be very careful about the vocabulary you use, and also any references to technology or things that just existed during that time. You have to make sure you get those right, because I'm sure if you don't, there's going to be a reader out there who will let you know.
Oh, yes. But, the thing is, I've been studying Victoriana for 30 years. So getting the vocabulary and getting the technology correct is actually not nearly as difficult as pretending I don't know what I already know. I know why the German army is building up in 1888. I know what's going to happen 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road. I know what the fallout of that is going to be. They don't. They are very much, I try very hard to stay in the headspace of the fact that these are contemporary people living in their modern age for them. They're looking at all of the technological advances that have happened over that kind of long 19th century. When Victoria's reign started in the 1830s, everybody was still getting around on horseback, and everybody was using candlelight. By the time Victoria died, you had motor cars and electricity. And in between, you had gas lights and steam trains. And so that is a phenomenal amount of change for people to navigate. And I think probably until our generations have dealt with the information age and all the technology that's come about probably since the late 1970s, early 1980s, I don't think any other group of people has ever had to navigate quite as much change quite as quickly as the Victorians. It's staggering when you look at all of the things that they had to figure out how to process. Imagine if you've never seen an escalator before and you suddenly walk into a department store and the staircase moves. Witchcraft. And they were very, very keen on science. They were fascinated by science. Everybody had their subscription to scientific lectures where they would go and hear about the latest advances, or they would subscribe to periodicals that told them, hey, this is what we're finding out, and hey, we're laying a telegraph line, and now you're going to be able to communicate with people instead of at the speed of a horse. A courier going on horseback, you're going to be able to communicate in a matter of hours with people on the other side of the world. Staggering stuff. And kind of putting yourself in the place of people who are constantly having to negotiate that sort of change. I actually have more in common with them than I ever expected I would.
Speaking of change, again, this is the 9th novel in this series.
It is.
How has Veronica and Stoker evolved over the course of the series?
They started off, Veronica's still enormously headstrong as a human being. She's very willful. And Stoker started off with a huge number, not just walls up, but moats and drawbridges and prison doors and everything between himself and basically everyone else in the world. And over the course of the 9 novels, we've seen cracks appearing. They are very much assembling together a found family of people. Some of them are actual members of Stoker's family that he's reconnecting with. We see the sort of love-hate relationship he has with his brothers, because he has 3 of them, and Veronica likes them all much more than Stoker does. And because she is such a strong personality, they do end up cropping up. And Veronica establishes friendships with them. And in turn, that means they're kind of more in Stoker's orbit. But then Stoker brings in people as well. We have Julien Dorland, who is a Franco-Caribbean pastry chef who has become a part of their world. And we have J.J. Butterworth, who is, in those days, they would have referred to her as a girl reporter, but she's a newspaper writer. And like Veronica, very headstrong, very intrepid, but she's going about it in a very different way. And so we have all of these people coming in. And so over the course of the books, I think we can see them, wrestling with the kind of the idea that no man is an island, and figuring out who do you let onto your island? Who do you establish connections with, and who's just not really worth your time? Because they absolutely, neither one of them are interested in conforming to Victorian societal expectations. That's just not a thing. And plenty of people didn't. And so for Veronica and Stoker, what does that look like as they're putting their lives together? And they do change and evolve a little bit with each book, with each crime, with each murder that they solve. They get to know themselves and the people around them just a little bit more.
Deanna, there's a question that I like to ask authors of fiction, and it's this. If you could spend a day in real life with one of the characters from this novel, who would it be and why?
Oh, Lord. There is a character in this book that I introduced by the name of Parthenope Fleet. And what I love about Parthenope is she is not a natural scientist. She is a hard scientist. She experiments with electricity and galvanism. And she has this incredible laboratory that she's built, and she's in her early 60s, and she is the sort of indomitable woman that I see Veronica potentially growing into 30, 40 years down the road. And she's a character that I could not spend a ton of time with on the page, but she is definitely a character I would love to spend more time with. For sure. And then overall in the series, Julien Dorland, because this man can make incredible pastry. And I feel like tea time with him would be just so much fun.
A Grave Robbery is the 9th novel in the Veronica Speedwell series. It's by Deanna Raybourn. Deanna, thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you, Dan. It's been a pleasure.
Now, if you'd like to purchase A Grave Robbery, I've placed a link for you in the description below. And if you'd like to see more videos about books and their authors on a wide variety of topics, be sure to subscribe, like, and click on the bell to be notified about future programs. I'm Dan Skinner. Thank you for watching this edition of Some Books Considered.